There is a river in North America that drains half a continent, gathering the rain of 31 of your century's states through 1,000 tributaries and carrying it, brown and patient and immense, 2,000 miles to the sea. And for one long generation in the middle of the 19th century, the finest way ever devised to travel, it was a white wooden palace, 3 decks tall, gilded like a wedding cake, drawing so little water that its own pilots joked it could run on a heavy dew, pushed along by 2 great churning wheels and the breath of high-pressure steam. The Mississippi Steamboat lived fast and is remembered forever, and its nights were its glory. The whole lit confection sliding down the dark continent with music in the saloon and one silent man high in the glass house at the top, reading the black water like scripture. Tonight, you are aboard, mid-river, southbound, with 800 miles of current ahead, and nothing required of you until breakfast. So settle into your bed. Let your shoulders sink. Let your hands rest wherever they are comfortable. There is nothing to remember tonight, and nothing to solve. If you drift off before the river is done, that is exactly what this story is for. You wake up in a stateroom on the cabin deck, in a narrow, clean berth, with the whole boat breathing around you, and the breathing is the first thing to learn, because it will rock you all night, and it has 3 parts. Deepest is the wheels, the paired side wheels turning in their tall boxed housings just aft of your window. A great soft, continuous churning, water lifted and folded and laid down again 30 times a minute. Less a sound than a pulse. The boat's actual heartbeat, felt in the berth frame and the washstand and your own breastbone. Above it, ride the engines, unhurried at the night's easy bell. The long sigh and return of the pitmans swinging their slow iron elbows. And highest of all, the voice your century would recognize from every riverboat ever put on film. The scape pipes atop the boat exhaling the spent steam in rhythmic breathy coughs. Ha, ha, ha. The steamboat's own way of breathing out, audible for miles across the water. The sound that tells every landing and every farmhouse on both dark banks that a boat is coming down, alive, on time, and working easy. Your stateroom is small and complete, berth and washstand and a hook for your coat, and its door opens inward to the grand saloon and its window outward to the river. And the name of the little room is itself tonight's first gift, because the fashion on these boats, when the builders fitted out the first fine cabins, was to name each little chamber after one of the states of the young republic. Virginia, Ohio, Louisiana, painted on the doors in gilt, so that a passenger slept in a state, and the little rooms became staterooms. And your century, which has never once slept aboard a sidewheeler, still books staterooms on every cruise ship afloat, carrying the gilt lettering of this exact river inside the word unread, like river water carried in a sealed jar. Step out, before settling for the night, into the space the stateroom doors all open onto, because the grand saloon of a first-class packet at evening is one of the sights of the American century, and it is running at full glow. It is a single room 200 feet long, running the whole length of the cabin deck like a gilded tunnel. White and gold, its arched ceiling ribbed with fretwork carved fine as frost. Chandeliers hung down the center line every 10 yards. Their oil flames doubled in the long mirrors at either end, so the room seems to continue into golden infinity in both directions, and down its middle. At this hour runs the supper's afterlife, the long tables cleared and regrouped into their evening constellations, ladies at the after end in the carpeted cabin reserved to them, a knot of planters and drummers midway trading cigars and cotton prices, a game of whist under the brightest chandelier conducted with the gravity of a treaty negotiation, and, at the piano, a young woman from the Louisiana stateroom playing the sentimental airs of the season, while 3 voices follow her approximately, and a waiter moving down the immense perspective with coffee, his tray riding the boat's gentle working like a gull riding a swell. And the marvel of the room, The thing every European traveler writes home in italics is where it is. This palace is afloat on a wilderness river, drawing 5 feet of water, gliding at this moment past bottomland forest, where the nearest neighbors are herons, the chandeliers, and the frost-white fretwork, and the whist game proceeding through 100 miles of darkness at a stately 10 miles an hour. Luxury not built on bedrock, but riding on a breath of steam and 5 feet of brown water. And when you have seen the saloon at full evening glow, you have seen the whole boastful, improbable, endearing theory of the steamboat age in one room, which is that there is no reason, none whatever, that the middle of a continent-sized wilderness should not have chandeliers. And the boat herself, understand her drowsily as she carries you, because her architecture is a single idea worked out in white pine and gilt. And the idea is the river's own. Draw nothing. A deep-keeled ship would ground on this river's first bar and die there. So the Western steamboat was invented shallow, a great buoyant tray of a hull, flat-bottomed, wide as a barn floor, spreading her enormous weight so thin that loaded palace and all. She wades in 5 feet of water, and light. She skims in 2, and the pilot's standing joke about running on a heavy dew is only barely a joke. Everything above the tray is lightness pretending to be grandeur. The decks stacked up 3 stories in thin white pine. The fretwork sawn lacy not just for beauty, but for weight. The tall twin chimneys guide with rods. The whole confection engineered like a wedding cake and a kite in equal parts. Top-heavy to the eye, and floating, in fact, like a leaf. And her decks overhang the hull in wide sponsons called the guards. Promenades hung out over the water itself, so that a passenger at the rail stands suspended above the passing river with nothing beneath his boots but planking and reflection. She is not built for the ocean, or for decades, or for glory in a museum. She is built for this river, exactly this one, its bars and snags and 5-foot crossings. A creature of her habitat as perfectly fitted as the herons she startles. And when the old rivermen boast that their boats could float wherever the ground was a little damp, they are describing, in the river's own comic dialect, a genuine masterpiece of adaptation, the palace that weighs almost nothing, the tray that wades the continent, the wedding cake that reads, to the river itself, as barely there at all. But the boat's true theater is not the saloon, and tonight you hold the pass every traveler covets, an invitation, earned by asking good questions at supper, to climb to the highest, quietest, most exclusive room on the western waters. The pilot house. Up the companionways you go, past the Texas deck where the officers sleep, to the small glass temple perched on the very top of everything, and step in, softly as instructed, because this room keeps church rules after dark. It is dim, deliberately, no lamp burning, so that the eyes of the man at the wheel hold their night vision whole, and it is quiet. The loudest thing the wheel's pulse coming up through the frame, and it is mostly window, glass on every side and filling the forward half. The great wheel itself, taller than the man behind it, its lower arc sunk through the floor, and the man standing easy within it, one hand on a spoke, silhouetted against the enormous night, is the pilot. And he is, by common consent of the whole river, and by wages that embarrass the captains, the monarch of this boat, and one of the most remarkable professionals in this entire journey of centuries. Because consider what he is doing, right now, while you settle onto the visitor's bench. He is steering 300 feet of palace down a black river at night, and the river is not a road. It is a living thing, 1,000 miles of it in his charge, that shifts its sandbars with every rise, eats its banks by the acre, plants new snags every season, and shows, at night, almost nothing. And he holds it, all of it, in his head. Every bend, every bar, every reef and crossing and bluff and one-limbed cottonwood of 1,000 miles of river, learned by heart. Not once, but 4 times over, upstream and down, high water and low. And relearned perpetually, because the river rewrites itself, and the pilot's memory must be rewritten with it. The freshest news of every crossing, traded between boats and posted in the association's books, so that the man at the wheel is navigating less by what he sees than by a vast, current, constantly corrected model of the river that exists nowhere but behind his eyes, and a famous cub pilot who trained on these very waters and who later became the most beloved writer in America, taking his pen name off this river's sounding calls, spent whole chapters trying to make the shore world understand the size of that mental feat, and confessed that the learning of it had been the hardest and proudest work of his life, and that once a man truly held the river in his head, the river's face became to him a book, one that told its meaning to him alone, with a new story every day. The pilot has said perhaps 9 words since you entered. That is also part of the office. He shifts the wheel a spoke. The palace beneath you leans a degree. Some invisible crossing is made good, and the black river pours on under the bows exactly as if nothing had happened, which is, you begin to understand, the whole art, the mastery measured precisely by how much never appears to occur. Beside the great wheel in the glass house, on the high bench, sits the room's other occupant, silent as furniture. And he is the future of the river, currently 17 years old and memorizing it. The cub. He is the pilot's apprentice, bound to the trade for his training the way the copyists and the navigator's boy were bound in their centuries, and his education is the river run over and over, trip after trip, year after year, standing every watch beside his chief, questioned without mercy at any hour. What is the shape of the bend above the island? Where does the reef make down at this stage of water? What did the bank look like here last low water, and made to answer and corrected and questioned again until 1,000 miles of moving geography has been transferred, bend by bend, from the older head into the younger, and the transfer is conducted famously in a pedagogy of dry withering irony that every pilot on the river endured as a cub and administers as a chief. The sarcasm itself traditional, handed down like the wheel, and beneath it, invisible and total, the patience of a man installing his life's whole learning into his replacement, spoke by spoke, night by night. Tonight the cub has the dog watch memory work, sitting dark and cross-armed, running the next 50 miles forward in his head against the black windows, and twice the pilot tosses a question over his shoulder into the dimness, and twice the answer comes back a half-beat slow but correct, and the pilot's grunt is the highest grade issued on this deck, and you are watching. From the visitor's bench, the exact scene this journey has now shown you in every century it owns. The chant passed at the fire, the star houses drilled on the beach, the ledger explained at the elbow, knowledge that lives nowhere but in people, being poured carefully from the full vessel into the empty one at night above the water while the freight sleeps. And since the dark hides the river's face from you, the pilot, in the way of masters with a civil audience, unbends by degrees and teaches you to read a page of it, and the lesson is the finest S-curve of knowledge this river owns. Water talks, he says, if you learn its grammar. By day, a long slick streak on a ruffled surface means a reef sliding under, the bar close beneath killing the wind's ripple, while the same slick in other light is only a wind lull, a false reef, and telling the true from the false at a glance is a year of a cub's education. A faint dimpling ring that travels means a snag riding just under, a drowned tree walking the bottom, the deadliest print on the whole page. The water above deep safety has one color, a brown with depth in it, and the water over a coming shoal pales by a shade no landsman would ever see. And the lines of drift, the floating wood, string themselves along the current's true channel like iron filings along a magnet, the river underlining its own text. And at night, the grammar changes alphabet, but not language. The pilot reads now by shapes and shines, the loom of the banks against the stars telling him the bends, the water's faint sheen telling him more. For a smooth, safe reach shines one way under starlight, and a breaking reef roughens the shine like breath on a mirror, and the shadows of the shores lie out across the water in patterns he knows bend by bend. And where the night goes truly black, cloud shut, rain shut, he steers stretches of it. He says this without any emphasis at all, by the shape of the darkness itself, by memory, by the feel of the wheel and the sound of the scape pipes echoing differently off a near bank and a far one. Running water he cannot see at all on a model of it, 20 years deep. And the great ones he allows, filling his pipe, could run their whole 1,000 miles so, and hated moonlight, some of them, as a crutch that made cubs lazy. You look out at the Black River with your new quarter hour of literacy, and it has already changed, the way a foreign street changes after your first 10 words of the language. That long pale streak ahead, you now know enough to wonder about. The pilot has known for 5 minutes. He crosses the wheel 2 spokes, unhurried, and the streak slides harmlessly to port. A reef with 100 tons of palace walking politely around it in the dark. And he resumes his pipe, and the river resumes its pouring, and the book reads on beneath you at 10 miles an hour, telling its story tonight to exactly one man, who is not you, which is why you may sleep. And when the river shoals toward a doubtful crossing, the pilot rings for the boat's oldest instrument, and it is a man's voice, and tonight you hear it perform the most famous 2 words in American waters. The leadsmen go forward to the bows, one to each side, swinging the sounding leads, the weighted lines marked off in fathoms, and they cast ahead. Let the lead find bottom as the boat comes up on it, read the mark at the waterline, and sing the depth back to the pilot house. And the singing is the point. Each cast, delivered in the long musical cries, the trade has polished for a century, drawn out so they carry over wheels and steam. Quarter less 3, the chant floating up from the darkness forward, half twain, the voice arching on the second word. And then, as the channel proves itself, the call every ear on the river loves best, the one that means 2 full fathoms, 12 whole feet, safe water, and plenty for any boat on the western rivers. Mark Twain, sung slow and reassuring into the night, no bottom to fear, come ahead. The pilot takes the calls without appearing to hear them, the depths dropping into his model of the crossing like coins into a counted till, and the boat feels its way over the bar at half speed, with the leadsman chanting the water's floor to the man at the wheel, an unbroken conversation between the bottom of the river and the top of the boat, conducted in song. And when the calls deepen and the crossing is made, a single bell rings the engines back to full, and the chant closes with the last long mark, Twain trailing off contented. And somewhere in the years just behind this night, a young cub pilot standing his trick on these waters is hearing that same call so many hundreds of times that when he later trades the wheel for the pen, he will sign his books with it, Mark Twain, Safe Water, and carry this river-sounding song onto the shelf of every library on earth, where your century reads the 2 words daily without ever once hearing the leadsman's cry inside them, the depth still being sung faintly under all those pages. Come ahead, safe water, come ahead. Down through the boat then, on your way back from the heights, 1 deck below the waterline of sleep, to pay the visit the machinery has earned, because the engine room of a western steamboat at night is a cathedral of the age of steam, run by 2 unhurried men in shirt sleeves. It is long and lamplit and hot, and it moves. Everything in it moves. The two great horizontal engines lying along the deck like resting giants, their piston rods stroking out and home. Out and home. The pitmans swinging aft to the wheel shafts in their long, easy arcs. Everything oiled and gleaming and slow at the night bell. The whole apparatus less like a machine at work than like a big animal breathing in its sleep. And the engineer on watch moves through it with an oil can, touching his charges here and there like a groom in a stable, listening, always listening, because an engineer runs his plant by ear, the way the pilot runs his river by eye, every bearing and valve singing its own note of health, and one sour halftone in the chorus worth more than any gauge. Against the forward bulkhead stand the boilers in their brick-set row, fires banked easy for the night run, and above them, the safety valves, and the engineer, seeing where your eye has gone, gives you the phrase of the evening with the small pride of a man handing over his trade's coin. When the pressure climbs past what the night's work needs, the valve lifts of itself, and the boilers exhale their surplus in a rushing white roar off the top of the boat, harmless, spectacular, and necessary. And the river's word for it became your century's word for it, letting off steam. The pressure vented before it can do harm, and every person in your world who has ever gone for a furious walk or shouted harmlessly into a pillow is practicing boiler management, licensed off this deck. And the engineer, who has watched the phrase sail off into the language while he stayed with the boilers, polishes his oil can spout and observes that folks ashore let off steam considerable more than his valves do, and his valves are the better adjusted. Below the engines, at the very foot of the boat's working, burns the department the whole palace actually stands on, and its watch deserves its minute before you climb back to the gilt. The furnaces. The firemen work in the red glare of the open doors, stripped to the waist and shining, swinging the 4-foot cordwood into the flames in a steady alternating rhythm. 2 men to a battery, the heat rolling off the brickwork and walls, and their craft is real craft. The fire built and raked and fed, not for spectacle, but for the steady, even steam the night bell asks. Wood chosen and placed, drafts trimmed. The boiler's hunger managed like a team of horses on a long grade, and their watch and watch through a southern summer run is labor at the outer edge of what this journey has seen anywhere. And they sing at it, which is the fact every traveler remembers. The firemen's songs rising with the sparks, call and answer over the furnace roar. The leader lining out a verse about the boat. The mate, the river, and the crew answering in a surge. Music made exactly where the work is worst, which is a human pattern. This journey has met in every century and honors every time. And their fire is the boat's true ancestor flame, the one all the rest descends from. The steam in the pipes, the turn of the wheels, the light in the chandelier's oil, every motion and glimmer aboard traces down through the iron to these open red doors and these swinging shoulders, the palace's entire life issuing from its lowest deck, which the palace upstairs mostly declines to think about, and which this story, in the habit it has kept for 15 centuries now, makes a point of coming down to see. And now, between the gilded deck and the laboring one, the passage this journey owes, and on this river it must be given without one grain of softening, because the beautiful boat you are sleeping on worked for an economy whose true name your century still uses as its harshest idiom without always remembering why. This is the river of the Cotton Kingdom, and the kingdom runs on slavery. The bales stacked 10 high on the main deck below, you were planted, hoed, picked, and pressed by enslaved people, and the boats themselves carry a darker freight than cotton, for these decks are also the highway of the domestic slave trade, human beings purchased in the worn-out tobacco lands of the Upper South, and shipped down this exact river to the brutal sugar and cotton frontiers of the lower, separated from wives, husbands, children, everyone, and the enslaved of the upper river knew precisely what the phrase meant and feared it above nearly all things and said it to each other as the worst that could befall. To be sold down the river, and your century inherited the phrase and applies it to betrayed colleagues and traded ballplayers. And underneath the casual usage, always, whether the speaker knows it or not, is this water at night and people in chains upon it. And this story will not sail you down this particular river without saying so, plainly, once, here. And the boat's own labor has its hard ledger too. The roustabouts sleeping now among the freight on the main deck, free black men and Irish immigrants mostly, work cargo at every landing in all weathers for wages at the bottom of the American barrel, driven hard, used up. The human machinery of the wedding cakes glitter, and the fires under those boilers you admired are fed by firemen whose watch in the furnace heat of a July run is as severe a shift as this journey has witnessed anywhere. And the boats themselves in the racing years, killed, boilers bursting on pushed and unlucky vessels with a toll that finally forced the young republic's very first federal safety laws into being. Steam regulated before almost anything else in American life was, because the price of not regulating it kept arriving at the levees in the newspapers. You know the discipline, 15 fires deep into this journey. The saloon's chandeliers are real, and the pilot's magnificent learning is real, and the leadsman's song is genuinely beautiful. And the kingdom this beauty served bought and sold human beings on these decks, and the full account sails together. Or the story is a lie, and so it sails together tonight, in you, down the dark middle of the river, all of it true at once, which is the only way this journey has ever agreed to travel. Deep in the second watch, the boat's rhythm gentles, the bells ring down slow, and she noses toward the black western bank, because the furnaces are hungry, and the night has arrived at its most theatrical errand. Wooding up. Out of the darkness ahead, a smear of orange resolves into fire baskets, iron cressets on poles blazing pine knot flames at the head of a rough log landing, and behind them rise the ranked cords of a woodyard, one of the 1,000 lonely fuel stations strung down the wilderness banks like beads. A clearing, a cabin, a dog now barking officially, and a woodman who heard the scape pipes 3 miles up and has his lanterns lit. The stage swings out, the boat sighs against the bank, and the main deck empties in a rush, roustabouts pouring ashore into the torchlight and forming the immemorial two-way procession, out empty, back bent under wood, a fire-lit conveyor of men and fuel jogging up the stage plank to the chant of a leader whose improvised verses about the mate, the cook, and the moon keep the lines moving and the tempers sweet, cordwood thundering onto the deck in growing mountains, while the mate conducts the storm with a voice pitched to carry over it. And the whole scene, torches, river, chanting shadows, the white boat glowing against the black forest, is the steamboat age's own favorite picture of itself, painted on more parlor walls than any Commodore's portrait. 20 minutes, 30 chords, and done. The stage swings home, the woodman counts his silver by cresset light, and becomes a dwindling orange smear astern, his dog delivering the closing remarks, and the wheels take hold of the river again. The scape pipes resume their easy ha, ha, and the boat stands out into the dark with her supper aboard, and you, who watched the whole opera from the boiler deck rail in your borrowed coat, climb back toward the stateroom with the torch flames still printed on your eyes, and the night folds back over the river behind you, as if the fire, the chanting, and the officious dog had all been something the darkness briefly dreamed. And the river carrying all of it deserves its own chapter at last, spoken from the boiler deck rail with the night pouring past, because the brown water under the guards is one of the great facts of the physical earth. This is the drain of half a continent. the rain that falls on the western slopes of the eastern mountains and the eastern slopes of the far western ones, across 1,000 square miles and more, finds its way, creek to stream to tributary, into this one channel, the longest river system in North America, gathering the waters of dozens of your century's states, the clear cold rivers of the north, the great muddy western one that brings the plains down with it, grain by grain, the slow southern waters, all of it braided by the time it slides under you tonight into a single brown enormity a mile wide, moving 4 miles an hour with the patient, unanswerable momentum of a body of water that outweighs argument. And the brown is not dirt in the insulting sense. It is cargo, the topsoil of the interior riding seaward in suspension, half a continent traveling as silt, and at the river's far southern end it is unloading, has been unloading for 1,000s of years, building new land into the Gulf, the delta, mile upon spreading mile of it, so that the river is not merely draining the continent, it is rearranging it, carrying the plains south a spoonful at a time and stacking them at its mouth like a patient clerk, filing the interior of America into the sea. The Pilot's River, the Leadsman's River, the Kingdom's River, and under all of those, this one, the geological worker, on shift tonight as every night for 10,000 years, and your birth rides on its back the way a leaf rides a draft horse, and the horse does not notice, and the leaf, if it is wise, simply enjoys the size of the motion, which is what you do now. Rail under your hands, brown miles sliding, the largest single moving thing in this whole journey of centuries, carrying you south at the pace of its own unhurried business. The river's own residents keep the night around the boat's passage, and the rail gives you their census before the berth claims you for good. The herons first, roused occasionally from the margins by the wheelwash, crossing the boat's lights in a slow, indignant glide, all folded neck and trailing legs, filing a complaint no one contests, and resettling 100 yards on. The owls of the bottomland trading their low questions across the water from bank to bank, each convinced, apparently, by the other. Beneath the surface, the river's famous citizenry going about its bottom-feeling business, the catfish, the great whiskered patriarchs of the deep holes, blue cats and flatheads of a size the levee liars have elevated into legend, 100-pounders sworn to on every wharf boat, monsters that dine, the roustabouts insist, on whatever the cook's boy tips over the fantail, and some of the sworn statements your century's fisheries men will concede were not even lies. The turtles on their snags, drawn up like a museum's collection by day, slid off into the dark hours ago. A beaver's slap somewhere shoreward, the river's own door closing, and along both banks, all night, the frogs, the enormous layered chorus of the southern bottomlands, the deep bass section of the bullfrogs under the shrill continuo of the spring peepers, miles of it, unbroken, the wilderness's own version of the saloon's piano, and the boat slides down the middle of the whole performance in her white-lit indifference, her triple breathing laid calmly over the top, and the toof musics, the made one and the wild one, travel the valley together for 800 miles without once acknowledging each other, which is, the pilot would tell you, the correct relationship between a boat and a river, close as a handshake, and strangers forever. The river at night has its society, and twice before midnight, the darkness ahead grows a pair of lights, another boat coming up, and the meeting of two steamboats in the dark is conducted in a language of steam and bells that every soul on the water speaks. The upbound boat shows first as a glow over the point, then as her chimney's twin sparks and the lit tiers of her decks, a floating birthday cake climbing the current a mile away, and the whistles open the negotiation, your pilot reaching up to the cord and laying a single long blast rolling down the river. I will take you on the one side. And the answer comes back across the water a moment later. One blast, agreed, the two monarchs settling in two notes what the rules of the road require. And the boats lean toward their agreed sides and pass, sometimes near enough that the saloon musics tangle briefly over the water. The passengers at the rails exchanging the wave that strangers on happy vehicles have always exchanged. The wheels' wakes crossing and slapping under both hulls. And then the other boat is a diminishing constellation astern. Her scape pipes fading, her light lying on the water behind her long after the boat itself has rounded from view. And between meetings, the humbler river traffic keeps its own hours around the great boat's passage, the flatboats and rafts of the old slow commerce drifting down at the current's own 4 miles an hour with a lantern on a pole and a man at a sweep. Month-long voyages your grandmother's generation made by the 10,000, still ghosting along the channel edges, and your pilot alters a half-spoke around each lantern with unfailing courtesy, the age of steam giving the age of drift its room, and the raftsman's hail floats up as you pass, unhurried, neighborly, wanting only the news and the time of night, and receiving both from the Texas deck like a benediction, and paying in kind with the only coin a raft carries, which is the wish, called across darkness between strangers on a continental river, of a safe trip down. And the boat herself is the valley's nervous system, as much as its carriage, which the night landing you half dreamed will have proved by morning, because a packet's cargo is only half freight. The other half is news. Before the wires reach these bottomlands, the steamboat is the mail, the newspaper, the market report, and the traveling fair, all in one white hull. The mailbags land at every wharf boat with the valley's letters. The city papers come aboard at the great ports and peel off landing by landing into the wilderness, days old and devoured to the advertisements. The freight itself is news. The news stove, the pianoforte created for the judge's daughter, the season's fashions in a drummer's trunks, and the boat's people are the columnists, the clerk retailing the upriver markets to the landing merchants in 3 sentences across the counter of the office, the chambermaids and the barkeeper carrying the valley's gossip in both directions with professional thoroughness, marriages, failures, elections, feuds, the price of cotton and the health of ants. All of it moving at 10 miles an hour in the only conveyance the valley has, so that the scape pipe's far-carrying breath means to every cabin within earshot of the river, not merely a boat, but the world, coming twice a week, each way. And the boat's arrival at any real town is the day's event entire, the levee filling on the first far whistle, the draymen and the merchants and the unoccupied of all ages assembling by 100s for the half-hour of roaring theater, and then the departure, and the levee emptying, and the town returning to its interval, already listening, faintly, for the next far breath on the river, which is the valley's actual clock, and keeps, the pilots like to say, better time than the courthouse. Between events, the night's long main feature simply runs, and it is the banks sliding. Take a last stretch of it at the rail before the berth claims you. The river is a mile of darkness, but its edges are inhabited, and they pass like a slow lantern show. The bottomland forest for miles at a stretch, a black wall doubled in black water, pouring by in absolute silence. Then a plantation's lights, the big house's windows yellow on its rise, the quarter's fires lower and nearer the bank, held in view a long quarter hour on a straight reach, the ledger of the age visible even in its lamps, and read now, by you, with the full account aboard. A landing town, wharf boat lit, a tavern's noise reaching the water thin and merry, gone. The mouth of a tributary felt as a cool exhalation and a brief working of the current under the hull. An island dividing the river around itself, the channel side chosen 40 miles back in the pilot's standing model. And over it all, mile upon mile, the night sky of the wilderness century, unsmudged. The great river of stars above tracking the great river of water below so faithfully that, at the long straight reaches, the boat seems to be running a lit corridor between two Milky Ways, one overhead, one under keel, trembling in the wheel wash. The air on the guards is river cool and smells of mud, wood smoke, and the green breath of a continent's worth of bottomland, and the boat's own breathing. Ha, 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 lays its patient count under everything, and the miles pass at the pace of the sliding banks, which is the exact pace you realize at the rail, at which scenery becomes memory slow enough to see everything, too steady to hold anything. The river's own lesson in letting things go by taught all night to anyone standing at the rail free of charge. And the pilot's last lesson of the evening, given as you left the glass house, is the strangest fact about his river and worth carrying to the berth. The river is not where it was. It never is. This water rewrites its own geography on a schedule no other great river matches. The channel wanders its valley like a dropped rope, bend swinging wider by the year as the current eats the outer bank acre by acre. Whole cottonwood groves undermined and delivered into the water, which is where the snags come from. The drowned trees planting themselves in the bottom by the 1,000, the river's own caltrops, mapped, feared, and fished out by the government's snag boats in an endless housekeeping. And when a bend swings too extravagantly wide, the river, in some high-water spring, simply loses patience and cuts across the neck, slicing a new channel through in a night and a day, abandoning 20 miles of its old course at a stroke, the marooned loop closing into a still crescent lake, and the river shorter by 20 miles before breakfast. Towns that were riverfront left inland on a dead lake. Plantations sliced from one state's bank to the others. The Pilots Association posting the news like a war bulletin, and every chart in every pilot house corrected in the head before the ink of the old one was fairly dry. A famous son of this river would later do the arithmetic as a joke with a straight face, observing that at the measured rate of shortening, anyone could compute that in some 1,000 thousands of years, the lower river must dwindle to a mile, and its towns consolidate under one alderman, which was his way of teaching the shore world the true lesson, that the river is not a fixture, but a process, a thing perpetually becoming, and the pilot's learning is not a map, but a subscription, renewed trip by trip forever, and the berth you are returning to is riding, tonight, on the youngest landscape in America, water that was somewhere else last year and will be somewhere else next, held on its brown business for the length of your sleep by one man's up-to-date mind. One more character stood behind the bar of the gentleman's cabin this evening, and his office is worth its minute, because he is the boat's memory and its diplomat, and the trade could no more run without him than without the leads. The clerk, the office of a Mississippi packet, the little gilt cage forward in the cabin, is the whole enterprise in a desk, and the clerk who rules it carries the boat's true cargo, which is accounts, the freight lists of 40 landings, the passage money, the woodyard settlements counted out by cresset light, the waybills and the consignments, and the COD pianoforte, all balanced nightly in a hand as fine as the fretwork, and beyond the ledgers, the softer books no one writes down, which planter is good for his freight bill, and which is not, which feuding families must be berthed at opposite ends of the cabin, which widow travels free because her husband piloted with the captain in the old days, and no one has ever once mentioned it. He knows every landing's business and every passenger's face, remembers who came up 2 years ago and asks after the daughter by name, adjudicates the small disputes of a floating village with a signature or a cigar, and stands at every wooding and every wharf boat at the head of the stage with his lantern and his lists. The one man aboard whom both the saloon and the levee address by name. The pilot owns the river, and the engineer owns the steam. But the clerk owns the voyage, its money, its manners, and its memory. And when the old rivermen of your century's histories are asked what held the whole gaudy, improbable trade together, the honest ones name neither wheel nor whistle. They name the man in the gilt cage, with the fine hand, who knew everybody and settled everything, and is at this moment closing his ledger for the night 2 doors down from your berth, entirely in balance. Your stateroom receives you back with its lamp turned low, and the berth has one final fitting for the Southern River summer, drawn ready by the chambermaid, and it is the gauziest architecture in this whole journey, the mosquito bar. It is a tent of white netting hung from a hoop above the berth, tucked all around, a room within the room, and on the lower river it is as essential as the boat's hull, the bottomlands raising their singing millions every warm dusk, and the bar defeats them absolutely, by nothing but geometry, the mesh too fine to pass, the tucked hem too honest to breach, so that the sleeper lies in a bubble of peace, while the whole frustrated chorus of the wilderness winds its grievances 6 inches away. On the far side of a cloth you can see the lamp through, and there is no luxury on the gilded deck, not the chandeliers, not the piano that the lower river traveler ranks above this veil. The difference between a night donated to insects and a night kept whole, hung on a hoop, weighing 4 ounces. Inside it, the boat's triple breathing takes you over entirely. Wheels, engines, pipes. The frame's gentle working. The river hissing its long syllable down the hull, a plank away from your ear. And the netting glows faintly with the low lamp, like the walls of a paper lantern, and you are asleep. Before you have finished noticing that you are, in a white gauze room, in a gilt wooden room, in a floating white palace, on the back of half a continent's water, all of it moving, none of it needing you. And once in the small hours, the boat's slowing half wakes you, bells ringing down soft somewhere below your dream, a landing being made at some sleeping town, and you drift in the gauze while the familiar audit files past. The stage creaking out, freight moving to the walking chant, muffled, unhurried, 20 barrels worth of errand, a mailbag's soft thump. 1 passenger ashore, boots on planking, a lantern dwindling up a levee, somebody home. The stage home, the backing bell, the wheels taking their first full bites of the river again, and the scape pipes resuming the count they never really dropped. Ha, ha, ha. And the town swinging astern to its sleep, with its mail on the wharf boat, and its name already 1 mile behind. The berth tilts a long degree through the turn and levels. The netting breathes. The river takes up its hiss along the planking by your ear, and the whole event, town, chant, lantern, and all, files itself away as something between a memory and a dream, which is exactly the drawer such things belong in, and you go back down with the wheels, carried, counted among the freight now, consigned to mourning. And as the deep night runs the river south, let the river's year wheel once past the netting, because this water keeps seasons the way it keeps everything, immensely. The high water first, the spring rise, when the melted winters of half a continent come down together, and the river climbs its banks and spreads brown and lordly through the bottomland forests for miles, the boats running the flood like gods, over the bars, over the towheads, shortcuts across drowned points that no keel touches in August. The pilot's charts rewritten weekly, the landings moved up the levees, the whole valley holding its breath behind its earthworks. Then, the long fall of the low-water summer, the river shrinking to its channels, the bars rising like whales, the great boats feeling their way with both leadsmen singing and lesser boats laid up entire, the season of groundings and warped-off escapes, and pilots' wages earning themselves twice over. Then, the cotton, the autumn tide of the kingdom. The landings piled with bales and the boats loading until the guards kissed the water, racing the season downriver. The levee at the great southern port, a mile of stacked white gold and shouting. And in the north, the ice, the upper river closing like a shop for the winter, the boats fleeing south ahead of it, or freezing in at the landings until the spring breakup goes booming down the valley and opens the shop again. And the whole cycle leans into the next spring rise, high water to low, cotton to ice to flood. The river breathing in years the way the boat breathes in seconds, and the trade riding the enormous lung of it, generation on generation, at 10 miles an hour, in white boats that live a decade and are remembered forever. And at the far end of every downriver year waits the trade's great crescendo, which the boat will reach 3 mornings from tonight, and which deserves its place in your drowsing itinerary. The city at the river's knee. The great southern port announces itself for 50 miles, the traffic thickening, the banks combed into plantations wall to wall, and then the crescent of the levee itself, the most astonishing waterfront in the hemisphere. 4 miles of boats lying bow into the city, 2 and 3 deep. Packets and tramps and ferries, and the ocean ships come up from the passes, their deep-sea masts standing over the steamboat's chimneys like pines over cane, and the levee behind them one continuous roaring market of cotton bales and sugar hogsheads and coffee and draymen and 20 languages, the interior of the continent being transshipped to the planet at the top of its voice, and through it all, your boat will thread to her own berth with bells and inches to spare, and the leadsman's chant will close, and the wheels will fold their long night's count at last, and the gangways will let the voyage pour ashore into the roar. But that is 3 mornings away, and it is precisely the beauty of tonight's position that none of it applies. Tonight the boat is mid-passage, the purest place a traveler can be. The departure spent, the arrival unearned, every obligation on the far side of 400 miles of water, and the great port itself, just one more certainty being carried toward you at 10 miles an hour by people whose profession is exactly that, so that the roaring levee, considered from the netting at this remove, is simply one more thing that has been arranged, like breakfast, and requires from you tonight nothing whatever but the sleep you are already halfway down. And before the wheels carry you the rest of the way down, walk the boat's evening once more, deck by deck, touching each thing as you pass it, and letting it go. The boat breathing in 3 parts, wheels, engines, and the scape pipes. Patient, ha, 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 telling both dark banks that she is alive, on time, and working easy. Let it go. The little room named for a state, the gilt lettering of this river, carried inside a word your century still books, unread, like river water in a sealed jar. Let it go. The saloon's golden tunnel, doubled to infinity in its end mirrors, the whist treaty, the piano's sentimental airs, and the whole boastful theory that a wilderness deserves chandeliers. Let it go. The tray-holed palace that wades in 5 feet and skims in 2, the wedding cake engineered like a kite, and the pilot's joke about a heavy dew that is only barely a joke. Let her go. The cub dark and cross-armed on the high bench, running 50 miles forward against the black windows, and a life's learning poured spoke by spoke from the full vessel into the empty one. Let him go. The dim glass temple at the top, the wheel taller than the man inside it, and 1,000 miles of living river held current and corrected behind one pair of eyes. Let him keep it, and let it go. The water's grammar, the true reef and the false, the dimple of the walking snag, the shine roughened like breath on a mirror, and the book that tells its story to one man a night. Let it go. The lead swinging in the dark bows, the depths sung up to the wheel, and the 2 words meaning safe water that a cub carried off this river onto every library shelf on Earth. Let them go. The resting giants stroking out and home, the engineer grooming his stable by ear, and the valves whose harmless white roar taught your century what to call its own relief. Let them go. The firemen shining in the red glare, singing where the work is worst, and the palace's whole life issuing from its lowest deck. Let them go. The full account, the chandeliers and the chains on one river, the idiom with the kingdom's darkest commerce inside it, said plainly, once and carried whole. Let it be carried and let it go. The fire baskets flaring at the woodyard, the chanting two-way procession up the stage, the woodman's silver, and the officious dog delivering the closing remarks. Let them go. The drain of half a continent sliding a mile wide under the guards, the interior of America filed seaward a spoonful at a time by the patient clerk. Let it go. The herons filing their uncontested complaints, the catfish patriarchs enlarging in the levee's testimony, and the frog chorus and the boats breathing traveling the valley together, close as a handshake, strangers forever. Let them go. The mailbags and the days-old papers peeling off into the wilderness, the valley's gossip riding both directions, and the far breath on the river that keeps better time than the courthouse. Let it go. The clerk in his gilt cage with the fine hand, the books no one writes down, and the voyage's money, manners, and memory closed for the night, entirely in balance. Let him go. The single blasts agreeing sides in the dark, the birthday cake climbing past with her music tangling in yours, and the raftsman's lantern paid its half-spoke of courtesy and its news. Let them go. The bank's slow lantern show, forest and plantation, and tavern noise and tributary breath, and the lit corridor between two Milky Ways, one overhead, one trembling in the wheelwash. Let it go. The river that is a process and not a fixture, the bend cut off in a night, the 20 miles abandoned before breakfast, and the pilot's learning that is not a map, but a subscription. Let it go. The 4-ounce room within the room, the frustrated chorus 6 inches away on the wrong side of geometry, and the netting glowing like a paper lantern's wall. Let it go. The landing filed between memory and dream, the mailbag's soft thump, one lantern dwindling up a levee, somebody home. Let them go. The crescent levee 3 mornings ahead, 4 miles of the continent, being transshipped at the top of its voice, and the purest place a traveler can be, mid-passage, with the arrival one more certainty being carried toward you. Let it come, and let it go. And the river's enormous lung, high water to low, cotton to ice to flood, breathing in years while the boat breathes in seconds, and the trade riding it south at 10 miles an hour, remembered forever. Let it breathe, and let it go. It is all still there, and all still going by. The river makes the old promise in its own tense, which is the present continuous. The wheels are turning. The banks are sliding. The leadsman's call is drifting up from the bows of every boat still running in your century's memory. Safe water, come ahead. And the pilot has the watch, and will have it at 3 o'clock, and at 4, the river pouring toward him out of the dark and passing, red beneath your berth. So your hands can let go of the day, your shoulders can let go of the day, and your thoughts can walk down the stage plank now like passengers at a night landing, one lantern apiece, unhurried, expected, and let the boat back out and take the channel without them, because they are home, and the river will still be there in the morning. One last thing, and the river should say it in the leadsman's own office. Of every night watch this journey has kept, tonight's is the only one that sings its findings out loud. The abbey counted its hours in bells, the desert in a cry, the lake city in conches. But only here does the watchman actually announce, in music, over and over all night, the one thing every sleeper on every water most wants to know, which is how deep the safety runs beneath them. And the answer, sung slow from the dark bows in the two most famous words on the river, is 2 full fathoms and nothing to fear. And there has never been a plainer lullaby in any century of this whole long journey. The depth has been measured. It is sufficient. It is being measured again anyway. The wheels are counting. The pipes are breathing. Ha, ha. Easy and even, miles of notice to every sleeping landing. The pilot is dark-eyed in his glass house, 2 spokes into a crossing you will never know happened. And the call floats aft down the long white boat, over the cotton and the freight and the netted berths. Mark Twain, safe water, come ahead. Sleep now on the deep and measured river. Good night.